a lot of yarn. But for 2026, I'm going to be more mindful, I'm going to be more intentional, and I'm going to be attacking my stash. Hello, my name is Emily Crow from The Cozy Crow, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And today we are starting a special vlog series. I am considering doing this instead of my typical sit-down podcast videos, but for the year 2026, I really want to work through my yarn stash. I have done this type of a goal before, specifically in 2020. I know that was 6 years ago, which is wild to think about, but my goal for that year was to attack my stash and to specifically work through my older yarns and make projects that I wouldn't typically make, maybe make more gifts or donation type items, and also blog about my experience. When I had a blog in 2020, I would do monthly updates about what I learned from working through my yarn stash and the things I learned about myself and my making, about the yarns that I had and what I wanted to keep in my crafting habits based on working through my stash. And so that was a really neat experience, and it took a lot of time and effort to, think through that and to analyze what my experience was from working through my stash. And I would love to do that again. I just had a baby, and so we are entering a new season of life for myself, for my family, and I just need a good reset. I have some older stash, specifically in these tote bins, that I haven't worked through in years still, like they are still lingering. So I really want to find good homes for them, whether that's something that I make or whether they go to someone else. I have quite a lot of hand-dyed stash that I have accumulated over time, and I have lots of projects in mind that I want to work on. And so I would love to work through more of my hand-dyed yarn stash. Ultimately, my goal is to have my stash more accessible, because right now these cube organizers are like totally full. And so it makes it hard to find the skeins I'm looking for. It makes it hard when I do have new yarn to kind of like rearrange everything, because I don't have extra space to kind of play around with. And I am not going to be working as much with a new baby on board, and so I'm not going to be purchasing as much yarn. So I feel like now is the time to make a focused effort to work through my yarn stash, and I want to take you along with me as I go through that process and share what I learn. I'll share the projects that I'm working on. And so this is, going to be a new vlog series that I'm probably going to do monthly or maybe every other month. I don't know yet. But today, for our introduction, I kind of wanted to talk about the rules that I'm setting for myself, or the guidelines, I guess I should say, for how I'm going to keep track of my stash, what I'm going to do to document this process, as well as I would love to start working through this, because these totes I have had for a long time, and I haven't emptied them out and reorganized the yarn in here for a long time. And so I have random scraps around. I have mixed weights, mixed compositions of yarns. And so this is not working as far as knowing what is in my stash and what I can pull from. So I want to empty this all out, keep track of everything that I've got, and reorganize it so that I can access this yarn a little bit easier. These totes are not going to live in here. I'm going to put them probably in the garage, but I want to pull out a few skeins of yarn for projects that I think I will work on soon to kind of work through this old stash. But this whole Attack My Stash series is also going to work through my newer stash, my hand-dyed yarn that I've acquired over the past 4 to 5 years, and all the whips too that I've got going on that I just haven't finished. I got some lingering whips, and we'll see what I can accomplish with a 5-year-old and newborn in tow. But I'm going to take you along with me for this whole process. And hopefully today we'll get through organizing my old stash, as well as some bigger scraps I have for DK weight yarns and worsted weight yarns, and kind of set up a Google sheet or something to start keeping track of what yarns I do have and maybe project ideas in mind for them. But first, let's talk about my overall goals, my overall guidelines for attacking my stash this year. I had to take a break from filming because I had to feed my baby. You can hear him. That's just how these vlogs are going to go, because I am now a mother to a newborn. It's been a while. My little milk monster wanted to eat, even though I fed him literally an hour ago. So if you hear his little grunting noises, that is why. But I wanted to talk about my overall goals for Attack My Stash 2026 and how I'm going to keep track of the skeins and yardage that I use and things I want to track in general, all that stuff. I'm going to take it easy. My big goal for 2026 is to have a net negative in total number of skeins in my stash. And we'll define skeins in a second, but I just know if I aim for like a certain number, first of all, I have no idea exactly how many skeins I have currently in my stash, so that's going to be a little bit hard. But then I just don't know what this year is going to look like, what time I'll have. I really just want to use up more yarn than I have coming in to my life so that I'm making progress as far as how much space my stash takes up. That's really my big goal. Something else though that I would really like to do is get rid of these totes. I have like 3 full-sized totes. I don't know what it is, like an 18-quart tote or whatever. I don't remember what size, but like a full-sized tote bin. I have 3 of them with older stash yarn and a couple other like extra scraps and stuff. I would love to be able to empty out those bins. And so that's definitely greater than a net negative if we're looking at it that way. I don't know how many skeins that is. And I don't necessarily need to use up all of those skeins or donate all of those skeins, but I would love to use up enough of my total stash that I won't need these bins anymore and I can store this yarn elsewhere in my yarn room. That is the ultimate goal. I would love to be able to do that, just to have less of these tote bins around. Now, when we're talking about skeins, I've seen people count skeins in a couple different ways. I really don't like the idea of weighing my skeins and taking them gram for gram of what I'm using, because I don't mind having smaller scraps available to work on socks or do color work for other projects or things. Like, it really doesn't bother me having yarn that I've partially used. What really bothers me is having yarn I haven't had the chance to use at all, because I have a lot of yarn in my stash. And so what I'm going to do, we're gonna try this out. I'm going to keep track of my 100-gram skeins, my 50-gram skeins, and then any 20-gram minis that I'm working on, just the unused ones. And we're gonna keep track of if I start using them. So once they become a partial skein or a scrap amount of yarn, then I'm going to count it as being used. And we're going to work on scrap skeins for another goal some other time, right? That's not the purpose here. The purpose here is to focus on using the stash yarn that I have and putting it to use. So it doesn't really matter to me if I have some leftovers, as long as I've started into using those skeins of yarn. So I don't really want to keep track of total grams. I want to keep track of the actual skeins unused. And then once they have partially been used, I will check it off the list. I'm going to follow a similar like keeping track that I have done personally in the past, where say I'm working on a pair of socks. I'm not going to count that skein as used until I finish that pair of socks. But once that pair of socks is done and I have completed using that skein of yarn in that project, I'll count it as done. Or if I'm like working on a sweater and I have like multiple skeins of yarn that I'm going to work through, as soon as that skein of yarn is done entirely, if I'm still working on that project, I will count that skein as being used up, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my thought process. I just don't want to work with so much intricate math for like grams and decimals, and like that's not how I think about my stash mentally, and so I don't want to count my stash in that way. I'd rather just count in solid numbers. I'm going to try doing 100-gram skeins, 50-gram skeins, and minis, just because those are some easy increments that I have in unused skeins in my stash. So that is the thought. Let me know if you have tracked your stash before and what kind of methods you have used to count, because I really just don't want to do something super complicated. So we're counting unused skeins, or I mean, if I've wound up the yarn but haven't used it yet, that is still unused, then we're gonna count that as a full skein of yarn. And then once it's used, I will subtract 1. We're gonna make it simple. As far as other things I want to track, I do need to make this like Excel spreadsheet or like sheets on my computer or whatever, but I would love to keep track of the brand of yarn, the colorway if I have it, how many total skeins, and maybe I'll make a comment if I have like a large partial skein to go with it, so that when I'm stash busting and I'm like wanting to find a hat pattern, but I need more than 1 skein of yarn, I know I have like a skein and a half, even though I'm only counting 1 skein in my stash. So I might do that. I would also love to keep track of when I use that yarn, what project I use it in. I would love to keep track of how much yarn I used, of course. I would love to keep track of what that item was, you know, to help with my statistics for the end of the year. Like, was it a hat? Was it socks? Was it a sweater? You know, whatever. I also want to keep track of whether that was a design of mine, whether there was a test knit, whether it was a gift, if it was something I donated, things like that. Just, again, for my statistics for the end of the year to make it a little easier to make my yearly video at the end. And it's just interesting to see kind of my making habits. And I would love to just understand a little bit more about how this challenge is going to shape the things that I create this year, because I really haven't had big goals for the past couple years in my making. I've just flown by the seat of my pants and kind of seen what my mood is, or what test knit is coming up, or oh, like I have Christmas gifts that I want to make, and so like dropping everything else and working on Christmas gifts. Like I would love to be a little bit more intentional about the things that I make and learn from those choices as I work through my stash and see what is best for the stash that I have, and you know, what projects I work on. Is it the original project I intended for that yarn, or in the past couple years as it's been in my stash, has my taste changed? So I want to do something different. I would love to see. Family needs me, so I'll have to come back to this, but I think you're going to see me later going through my tote bins and trying to start to organize that as much as I can, and kind of setting up that Google Sheet or whatever that I plan to use to kind of keep track of my yarn and start to count. I don't know if I necessarily want to count all the skeins and keep track of how much I have to start with, but I'm definitely going to keep track of my ins and outs for every month, and I'm going to take you along with me as I work through that yarn and make some stash busting decisions and see kind of where the end of the month leads me. This was everything in those totes. Time to organize. So this is a mess. I left a whole bunch of things in this bin because, and I'll show you in just a minute, I think these are going to be my yarns that I have the lowest potential of using because they're kind of specialized, and the highest potential of maybe reselling or regifting for people who would use these yarns, because they are really nice for their intended purposes, and I'm just not going to use them very much for the types of things that I am making nowadays. So I'll show you. I've got a bunch of things that I purchased quite a while ago, and I've got mostly full skeins, and I've actually been thinking about how I want to organize my spreadsheet. That's the word I'm looking for. All right, so I've got my basic Excel. It's like a sheet, whatever the Mac has inherently. For my spreadsheet, I think I'm going to include scraps and full skeins on the same actual document, just because there's some colorways, for example, or some yarns that I have some partial skeins of and some full skeins of, and I think it'll be easiest to just organize all that together. And I'm just going to have a column where I mention how many full skeins I have for actually counting down on my total stash count, but also I can say total yardage in a column next door to it, so I can indicate whether I have any partial skeins I can use with my full skeins for a project, because that'll be really important to know if I have like a skein and a half of a hand-dyed yarn, so I can figure out what I want to do with that yarn to use up the appropriate amount of yardage, if that makes sense. Even though those projects in general would only use up one skein of yarn if I use a skein and a half that are already in my stash as a skein and a half, but just to help with picking projects and stuff, I think I'm going to include it all in the same tab of my spreadsheet. So I'm going to be adjusting that, but let's get started organizing the things that are all over here. And I would love to have one bin specific for my nice hand-dyed yarns, or even like the knit picks that I use with hand-dyed yarns, things like that, versus like the acrylic yarns and yarns that I'm less likely to use as I'm stash busting. The yarns in here. All right, so this bin of the things I'm gonna try to sell on Facebook Marketplace or in destash groups, I have an embarrassing amount of Bernat. This is the crushed velvet line, but I've got a whole bunch of this baby velvet, and even I think some regular velvet, or is this all baby velvet? Baby velvet, baby velvet. It's all baby velvet. Cool. So I've got a bunch of baby velvet from way back when it was really popular to make velvet scrunchies. I did markets for a while, maybe like, it was before I had my daughter when I started doing markets. So like 7 years ago is maybe when I purchased these, 7 or 8 years ago. So it's been a while. And some of these, I've used some of this yarn. I think most of these colors I've used a little bit of, but scrunchies don't take a lot of yarn. And there's not really a lot of good projects, at least things that I make, that use this type of like Chanel velvet yarn. So I haven't used a lot. There's some colors that I've balled up because I've used a substantial amount making a lot of this color, for example, but I have a lot of full or nearly full skeins as well. So I've got all of that is going to go in here once I categorize it. I've got a couple skeins of Love Heart. This might go somewhere else actually, because I can use this easily for amigurumi because I still do make some toys and things. But we've got the velvet. I'm going to put in all my Bernat Homemaker deck because again, this is a discontinued yarn that people really loved and I bought quite a few skeins of and I've used quite a lot of it. And so I wouldn't feel bad about rehoming this to someone who would use it if they had a project in mind, because I just don't have a project in mind. And this kind of like tube yarn is really good for certain applications. So this could maybe find a good home. This skein is unused, but I've got a handful of partially used skeins. So I'm sure they would be good for small home decor projects. So I will put those in here as well. So let's categorize this and then we can fill this bin up, organize, and move on to some other things as well. Okay, I know I said I was going to use full skeins only for measurements, but I think what I'm going to do is if it's half used or more, I'm not going to count it as a scrap. I'm going to count it as a full skein to be used up. Just because I have so many that are partial, or if they're barely touched, I still want to count those as a skein I'm going to be using up. So we're just going to establish that. And I think that this spreadsheet, I'm going to say which ones I'm counting as a skein. And so I'll be able to know which ones I'm using up as a skein versus what's just considered a scrap. Keeping track is just the only way I'm going to be able to know what my rules are going to be. But I think that's only fair, especially when all of those, they look like full skeins. None of them technically are. But I don't want to count them as a percentage or a decimal because that's just too much math and too complicated. If it's more than halfway, I'm going to count it as a full skein that needs to be destashed somehow. Look at this Karen X Pantone yarn. If that doesn't date how old my old yarn stash is, I don't know what will. That will also go in this box because I do not see a reason I would use that yarn specifically in this stage of my life. So hopefully it can go to a good home. Okay, so some of those measurements did not seem quite right to me, especially, I don't remember exactly how much I've used of each of these older skeins, but there's some skeins that I feel like I haven't really used any, and the math was just not working out. So I got a new scale because I actually looked at a full 100-gram skein of fingering weight yarn. It was measuring 78 grams, which is very, very off. I expect it to be a couple grams off either way, and that's totally reasonable, but 78 for one that's unused, not gonna work. Sorry, if you can hear him making his little baby dinosaur noises, that's why I'm using my mic, but I am doing the best I can. Got a baby wear because he will not nap otherwise at this time. So I got a new scale. Just like a $12 or $13 scale from Walmart. Nothing crazy, and it already seems to be making a lot more sense. And I just want these numbers to be accurate, especially if I'm going to resell any of this yarn so that the buyer has a good expectation for what I am listing. So this new scale said that my 100-gram skein of yarn was 105 grams, which is much closer to what I would expect. And it can be, like I said, plus or minus a small amount, and dye will actually add a little bit of weight to these skeins of yarn. So having it a little over totally makes sense. And with that, I'm going to go back through and weigh all of these yarns that I have already broken into and measure them and make sure to put that information correctly into my spreadsheet. And I think this box is almost done for the yarn that I'm most likely to resell. There might be a couple more things I might like toss in there, but I'm really excited to get this box done so I can move on to my acrylic box. I want to keep all my cotton yarns together, and then all my like hand dyed or more expensive yarn scraps all together is kind of how I'm thinking about organizing these. We're going to call that good enough. We can definitely cram more yarn in here, but this yarn makes sense together as all the things I'll be wanting to trade or sell on Ravelry. So we will close this up and move on to our acrylic stash. And probably cotton will go in the same bin, I'm thinking. All right, so the yarn has been taken care of. It's been organized. It's all in my spreadsheet. I've got a couple more things to organize and go through before this room is done. But that is for another day. For this Attack My Stash video, I really wanted to classify my yarn. It is too much. I've got too much else going on. So I took care of what's in the box. I'm going to upload things onto Ravelry. So make sure to check out down below if you are interested in purchasing or trading with me on Ravelry through my stash for all the things that are in box number 1. So make sure to check that out. That's linked down below if you're interested, if you saw anything that you would like. And then other than that, I will probably slowly categorize the rest of my yarn, but I don't think I can fit that into this video because that's just too big of a project right now. But I really want to prioritize getting rid of that old stash and making good use of it. So I feel good about categorizing that and kind of having a better record, taking a good look at what is there. In general, I want to work down all of my stash, not just that old stash though. So I think it will be helpful for me to go through some other things, but that will take a while. But I think the last thing I'm going to have in this video is going through my yarns and picking out some things that I hope to prioritize, some project planning for this next month or so. All right, so it is another day and I am getting ready to go through my stash and pick out the things that I hope to work on soon, like this spring is what I'm thinking. I like to have this very top section of my shelving be all the yarns that I'm most inspired by at this time, and I like to change it out probably seasonally, I would say. So yes, we are switching over to spring right now, and I know it's like beginning of February, but I'm feeling ready for spring. So we're going to be organizing my yarn stash accordingly. And I really wish I could classify everything, but I think after I organize this, show you the yarns that are inspiring me for the springtime, then I will, in my own time, off camera, go through and classify all of this yarn. We will put everything in the spreadsheet, but it will take a bit. But I wanted to show you the yarns that I really want to work on soon so you can be excited about how I'm going to be using up my stash. So let's go through and empty out that top area, pull out yarns that are inspiring me, and I'll tell you what I hope to make with them soon. Okay, so I have reorganized this, and you'll see I have some space on the top. I am not feeling as inspired to make from this stash, and I think that's because I've got a lot of whips. So my next Attack My Stash video is going to be about all of the works in progress I have and the yarn I've already set aside in bags with needles ready to go. so that I can hopefully tackle some of those things for Finish It February. And I think that will make me feel really good about then going through my stash that I've not touched yet. That's why there's a little bit of space, because I also want to focus a lot on works in progress, but I'll show that in the next video. But let's go through all of the yarns that I pulled out and the things that are inspiring me, not necessarily even plans, but just what I am drawn towards, what I might want to pick up in the next few months. And you'll see I have some extra sock skeins over here because they just don't fit, and they're not things I want to put up here because they're not things I want to work on in the next couple months. And so that's why they are just lingering. Again, I need more space in this shelving to work the way that I want it to work, and so I need to work through my stash. So let's go through each yarn one by one, chat about what I'm hoping to make with it. Okay, so for this first bin, these are all sock yarns, whether they are actual socks I really want to make or just colors that are inspiring me right now or ideas that I have. These are socks. I make a lot of socks. So these are all the sock yarns that I have set aside. I don't think I have any specific socks I want to make, though I am wanting to try out some new heels. What is that one that has kind of like a ribbed triangular shape? Vanilla is the new black heel. I want to try out a couple new heels. So I picked out some yarns I thought might be good for a pattern like that. Other patterns in my queue, I've got lots. I'm not really feeling color work right now. I've got a lot of other color work projects going on, but these are all, you know, textured vanilla plus type of sock yarns. So I got the Backcountry Knitter, a bunch of Kimber's Cozy Creations. Simple Yarn is in my hometown. Dragon Horde is also local to me. This yarn is from Pearl and Postulates when I was part of their Women in STEM collaboration. So this is my sock set for me and my experience in STEM because I am an ICU nurse. Olivia and Oliver Fibers. So sad that I can't order from them now because of tariffs. Magpie Fibers in this beautiful swanky base I've never touched before. I think this is going to bring me joy. Yarnaceous, another local to me dyer. Some dye mad yarns I got at Wool'n Folk. 316 Dye Studio I also got on Wool'n Folk. Some Candy Shop yarns that I wanted to work on, another local to me dyer. The Fiber Fox, this beautiful pie inspired skein. Tiny Human Knits, this is my last order from her with the tariffs. She will not ship to the US right now, unfortunately. And then one skein of Christmas yarn because I just didn't get a chance to work with a lot of Christmas yarn. So if I'm going to work with any Christmas yarn, it will be this sock set. So again, I don't know which of this yarn I'm going to use, but these are what's inspiring me right now. Okay, this middle bin is for accessory yarn. So I try to do all of this is sock yarn vertically. All of this is accessories, though I do have some sock yarns at the bottom because I knit a lot of socks. And then this last column is going to be all about sweaters, tops, other garments and things. So this is the bin of all the things that I might make into accessories over the next few months. A hat holding this yarn together. A sweater for my daughter, though I bought this yarn from Dyeing Wishes Yarn Co. a while ago, so I might need to supplement now that she is 5 years old. They just keep growing. This is yarn from Witchfire Fibers for a shawl, probably the Bennett sister shawl. Sorelli yarn for a hat for my mother-in-law, potentially. Her birthday is not until January, so I have a long time, but I've thought about casting on a couple of muscle bras just to have something easy on the needles I can work on whenever I feel like it, so this would be a good contender for that. Some ZZ Textiles yarn that I have in mind for a shawl design. Treehouse Knits for a hat where double-sided has this cozy cashmere fiber and then just regular sock yarn. Not sure if I would hold it together or if I would do like a muscle burra, have one side one yarn, one side the other. Haven't decided yet. Thinking I probably want to make a shawl out of this Sorelli yarn. And again, Sorelli yarn, but this is some bulky weight yarn to make a really quick hat. I thought this might be a good palette cleanser. And the last bin. These are the garments that I might potentially make in the next few months. A top in Sorelli yarn. Another top in Sorelli yarn. The Haven sweater, some kind of patchwork type sweater, though I haven't figured out exactly what I want to make yet. This is using red door fiber. A top in Dragon Horde yarn, a Doppio in Dyeing Wishes Yarn Co. in some beautiful springtime colors. Like I said, I like to go through all of my hand-dyed yarn stash that I keep in this shelving to kind of rearrange every few months and get re-inspired and figure out what it is I have upcoming for makes I can make. With a new baby in tow and my daughter not doing daycare nearly as much because I won't be working as much, I don't know what I will get a chance to make, but that's okay. I like to be inspired, and this yarn stash is beautiful, and so I like to have it out and inspire me
in that way, even if it's something that I don't have a chance to work on quite yet. And the goal is to eventually use up this yarn stash. I don't have to use it up right away, but I'm working on getting these numbers down. There you have it. There is a little look at my yarn stash that I'm hoping to work through this year for Attack My Stash. Thank you so much for joining me as I started the process of classifying my stash, especially my older stash. I'm really excited to be able to classify this part of my stash too, but I'll be doing that in my own time because I think you don't want to keep watching me work on my spreadsheet. But in the end, I will tell you how much yarn I have in total in my room because there is a lot here in my craft room, and I'm really blessed and grateful to have so much access to beautiful yarns, and I really want to show good stewardship of them and to use them while they are inspiring me and suiting my taste, and to be able to make the things that I've been excited to make. So this year we are focusing on using our stash. I'm excited to share with you more things that I'm working on, especially for the month of February. For Finish It February, I'm going to be sharing all my whips that I hope to work on and how much of my stash is currently encased in my whips that I'm really excited to use up soon. So keep an eye out for that video coming in just a few weeks. If you like this type of content and you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification down below to be notified every time I post a new video. And until next time, happy making and happy stash busting. Bye!